This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm super grateful for everything that you do. I have a great interview for you today with Rick Travis from the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Rick is going to give us an update on California gun control. So steel yourself for a very interesting interview. Let's get cracking. Rick, thank you very much for being on the show again. I really do appreciate it. As a Californian and a life member of California Rifle and Pistol Association, I deeply understand the trials and tribulations of being in the state, and I'm very grateful for all the work you do. And so now, although I'm sure it's going to be somewhat painful and somewhat exciting in other areas, what's going on in the state of California?
Yeah, you really should have queued up like Darth Vader's theme before I started talking.
You should have. Next time I'm going to get a mask, and I'm going to go, and then you've got to say, you don't know the power of the dark side. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry. That's it. So what's going on in California?
So this has been a time that is unfortunately reminiscent of Gunmageddon back in 2016 as far as gut and amend bills go. We've had several of them, and I think it's important that everybody realize that Governor Newsom had stated back in March, again in April, again in May, that the only thing the legislature was going to deal with were bills that were directly related to fighting COVID-19, the pandemic, and the economic recovery caused by COVID-19. So the concept would have been that every bill that would have went before the legislature had to fit one or both of those issues, and anything that didn't would be at least postponed till the next legislative season next year. That's not what happened. Go figure. And so what we've had are a couple of egregious bills that I wanted to highlight to people because they're coming up next week in the Senate to be decided on. And if they go to the governor's desk, this could be hugely wrong for us on a couple of different levels. So you have to remember, California Rifle Pistol Association always focuses on your Second Amendment rights. And this is why these both are such an egregious attempt. So the first one is Assembly Bill 3030. And for those people that listen to this that are into fishing, you'll probably remember a few years ago what was called the Marine Protection Act, which literally off the coast of California set up zones that you could fish in versus zones that you couldn't, and had what I will call rivers or channels between those zones that you could take your fishing boat, your ocean kayak, what have you, in between those areas and allegedly be able to fish. Now, the problem is, just let's say, Joel, you and I decide to go out down San Diego County through the Marine Protection Area in one of those, quote, border little rivers between the two areas. Well, the problem is we don't carry GPS on the end of our fishing hook. So our fishing hook most likely could sway underneath in the marine protected area. Thereby, if you caught something, you violated the law, you get fined, you could lose your license, et cetera, et cetera. So it's already in the status quo been problematic. Well, Assembly Bill 3030 is part of a much larger, more maniacal plot that has been put forward by the United Nations, which is designed to remove 50% of the water and land on the planet Earth away from people. It's about a topic that I've been talking about for years now called the rewilding, not just of America, but of the world, which is to remove mankind, humans like you and I, out of the natural environment and supposedly returning it back to its natural state. Couple problems with that. Humanids, if you are into the evolutionary thing, have been around for millions of years as part of that. So why are we going back, according to that theory, millions of years before there were any humans? Like, we don't even have the data for why that would be good or bad, not to mention that if you're truly an evolutionist, there are a lot of species that died between millions of years ago when humans weren't in the environment and today. So it's kind of a stupid idea, but specifically to California, what 3030 does, and this is how deceptively written it is, it says it's going to take all the water off of the Ventura, Santa Barbara County border in Southern California, all the way up to the Monterey Bay, and that will no longer be able to be fished by any of us regular everyday citizens. That will be completely off limits. And this is a great example of how the legislature tries to play the divide and conquer game. Because, of course, people that hunt, people that recreationally hike, people that mountain bike, people that off-road, people that ride horses are like, well, that has nothing to do with what I do, so I'm good. And that's where the fatal error is. Because what has happened is some of the Native American tribes who have joined this cause against all of us said, oh, well, we need to protect the waterways that feed the ocean. Those are springs, seasonal streams, creeks, rivers. Where does that water come from? When it falls on the western slopes or the coastal slopes of California and then trickles down into those bodies of water that eventually make it out to sea. So the land grab is that anywhere where rain falls and it ends up in one of those creeks or streams or springs or rivers and goes out between Santa Barbara and Ventura County all the way to Monterey. So think of the swath of land we're talking about on the western slopes would be no longer permittable for you to hike, bike, equestrian, hunt, do any of that. It would wipe out all that land from public access.
I'm astounded. I'm not. I'm not surprised, but okay. Now I'm going to ask the dangerous question. What are the odds of this thing passing and actually being signed into law?
Well, it blew through the assembly despite a great deal of outrage. And one of the things that we're facing is, we're honest on our side. If I'm representing California Waterfowl, I'm from Cal Waterfowl. It's a standalone organization. It doesn't belong to the CRPA, the NRA, or any other acronym. They're their own people. The problem on the elitist side is they have somebody like, I don't know, let me pick a name out of the hat, Bloomberg, who sits there and forms an organization that has 4 organizations under it, and each of them have 4. But in reality, it's one organization, but they have 16 different names, and they show up as 16 different things on a letter saying this is why you should do it. And everybody goes, wow, look, we've got all of California. No, you have 16 people from the same club representing micro clubs of that club.
Now, you can't tell me that the anti-gunners, anti-hunting, anti-fishing people and the tree bark eaters don't know that. I mean, they've got to know that. That's got to be common knowledge that that's the trick being done. They're just using that for public consumption.
Correct. And the other part of this that is so egregious in my book is that they're doing this at a time of what does land rights have to do with fighting COVID-19?
You mentioned gut and amend bills. What is a gut and amend bill?
So back a few years ago, we used to have an issue where, say, Joel, you and I came up with a bill because some child got hurt at an intersection. We would write the bill up. We would take it to our local assembly person. They would take it to assembly, and whoops, maybe this word should have went in front of that word. Well, we would be told, come back next year. So what happened was the legislature at that time said, this is stupid because we're keeping good laws from happening because of a grammatical error. So they passed this idea that you could go back into a bill once it had been introduced and amend it to clean up grammar and things like that that could make it hard to vote on. But if you go back to 2016, what we ended up with was a political match that occurred between both Lieutenant Governor Newsom on one side with his Proposition 63 and the person that wanted to run and did run against him for the governorship, which was Kevin De Leon, by that time with Governor Brown, who ran what we affectionately, and not sarcasm, called Gunmageddon Day, where they went in and they took bills that had nothing to do with the shooting community and broke down Prop 63 into about 7 different pieces of legislation and passed it in like 24 hours and got the governor to sign it to try to preempt Newsom's Prop 63. Of course, the voters went ahead and voted for that anyways, which is what's caused the litigation nightmare that we fight to this day with things like Duncan v. Becerra on the standard capacity magazines and Rody v. Becerra, which is on the ammunition restrictions, et cetera, and the list goes on. So what they did with this bill is this bill originally had nothing to do with what it is today. I forget actually what it was originally. And then there's another bill that I will tell you that just shows how the people really don't care, because Senate Bill 217, which is the next bill I was going to talk to you about, it was originally for special needs, like Special Olympics kids. That's what the bill was for. And then Senator Portantino gutted it and amended it to now be the outdoor recreational camp bill. So I want to stop there for a second. So number one, he took away a really good piece of legislation that was there for kids with special needs and all spectrums of society that would have assisted them, made it better. And I would have even given the argument was somewhat COVID-19 related because it dealt with trying to help youth. And instead turned it into a bill that, I don't mean to offend anybody, but it makes me think that everything my generation fought for against the former Soviet Union is coming to pass now here in California.
Well, I don't think you're offending anybody. I think you're right. I think you're right. So they're taking these bills that are written to cover one aspect of law, and they're essentially using the provision that allows them to go in and fix a grammatical error, and they're abusing that by stripping the original language out of the bill and inserting something else, whatever their other language is. So from a process perspective, why do that as opposed to just writing another bill? Does that give them some advantage to do that?
Oh, it does. If you look at today with Gavin Newsom having closed the legislature twice and basically making himself a dictator or an oligarch, he has been able to do whatever he's wanted to do. And as a result, they've used COVID-19 as a tool to do several things. Number one, none of us are allowed in the building because we might infect somebody. So all the meetings that would happen, which often, and we need to have listeners understand, often those meetings are, we would go, oh, is Assemblyman or Senator so-and-so in? No, they're not in today. And then we would position one of us in the hallway, one of us inside the office, waiting. And then all of a sudden, that person that wasn't in today would walk out the hallway door and go, oh, hi, Joel. I was waiting to meet you. So glad. Why don't you walk with me? And often that was the only time to try to convince them not to vote for something or to vote for something is an app. Well, with us not being able to be there, that's been cut off. Second thing they did was they cut off the ability for us to bring people. So on a previous show, I talked to you about a bill that we were trying to get passed with a few other groups that allowed kids who were terminally ill to be able to hunt or fish before they died because that was their dying wish. And we had some of those kids, of which the two of the three that we're going to testify have passed. Unfortunately, we had their parents, we had Gold Star moms, all ready to go testify. It is very hard, even for a leftist elitist, to look at those people on camera and say, no, I'm not going to support you. But it's really easy when they're not in the room because there's no optics battle in front of the people. And so what they've done is they've cut off all those testimonies and not allowed those people in the building or even to do what we're doing visually, from two different areas. So as a result, literally the people's voice is non-existent at this point in Sacramento. And that's why I think you're seeing them just run the gauntlet, so to speak, because they know it's very hard for us to beat them. And there's been a couple times our lobbyists and us have said in conversations to a couple of the members of both houses that we've been able to talk to, hey, we're going to fight this. And they're like, well, fine, fight us in court and we'll talk about it 5 years from now. So it's just this attitude of we're going to do what we want to do. And, probably about the time you get it in court, I'll have moved on to a higher level of office in Congress or somewhere.
See, this is the problem because it really is stripping us of our representation. We can't go argue the case. We can't, twist arms a little bit, not literally, but we can't motivate or, basically what we have here then is regulation and legislation without representation, which is a constitutional violation. I'm rhyming a lot here. So, but again, the problem is that, we could sue them, but how many years is that going to take and how many millions of dollars does that take? And they know that. And so they continue doing what they do. I'm assuming that Gavin Gruesome Nuisance, whatever you want to call him, although he's stated that the only thing they're going to do is COVID-19 related or economy related, is not going to be a bulwark against them doing this. He's just going to sign it and off it goes. Is that what you're thinking?
And that's the same game we've seen him play with, essential businesses, as he tries to push it down to, the county's doing this. I'm not doing this as the governor. That's the exact same thing he's going to do with his legislature. I didn't put these gun bills up here. They did that. But of course, I promised everybody that there was no gun bill I wouldn't sign if it restricted the Second Amendment. So obviously I have to sign them now that they're on my desk. So that's why I'm saying this is completely staged. It's completely planned. We know that. And we need people to realize that as we're telling people these are people you shouldn't vote for and these are people you should, is we're trying to protect your Second and thereby your First Amendment rights in this state. But I really want to go back and touch on this gun and amend to show you what they're doing, because
Please do.
Here's what we're facing. So because so many organizations, nonprofits, take Boy Scouts of America, take church camps, take inner city sports camps, those are ran and meet the needs of youth every summer by nonprofits at a very small profit percentage, if there's a profit. Many times they go in the hole to run these camps. So there's not this big margin. And the issue was, as COVID-19 unveiled itself, a lot of the ways that those organizations fundraise were taken off the map to be COVID-19 compliant. So there's no monies coming in. So people had to look at their staffs and go, who do we furlough? Who do we release? And so many of them furloughed their legislative representatives because, hey, there's going to be nothing that affects us because it's only, going back, COVID-19 or economic recovery. I'm BSA. I have nothing to do with those. So we put those people out on furlough. This is why this is so insidious, because this is what this bill, Senate Bill 217, requires. So, like I said, go back to whether you're a Boy Scout camp or a vacation Bible school, a swim camp, what have you. You have to hire at your cost a full-time camp director for that camp. But wait, there's more. That full-time camp director will answer to the state of California's fire marshal and public health officer. And you have to pay a special license fee now for that camp to the state and submit what that camp will teach, when it will teach it, and who it will teach it to. But there's more. You also have to hire your own public health officer that has to have a certain level of training, which is about an $80,000 starting pay. Beyond that, you also have to make sure you're compliant with whatever the state fire marshal says needs to be done with the buildings at the place where you're holding your camp, or they can close it down. And the state will find a local agency at the county level that will also be the on-site supervision. And both that camp director that you're paying for out of your money and that health officer will answer to.
Well, you're paying for out of your money that you don't have because you can't raise any money. They're essentially just legislating these camps out of existence.
Yes, because what they're also saying is they'll decide what the age group, which is the term they use as cohort, which means, is my cohort, first and second graders? Is it the first, second, third? What's the ratio of male to female? What's the ratio of counselors? What are the age of the counselors? Qualifications of the counselors? The state, who can't decide who to have on a road to fix a pothole in Caltrans, it's been around for years, is now going to get into the camp business and tell organizations that have been doing this for decades that they know more, and will decide who can allow you to play lacrosse or to kayak or to mountain bike or to be on a horse or to do archery or shooting. And they've already enumerated all those activities in Senate Bill 270 that they will decide when, how, and if those items will happen. And that's why I say this is very Soviet-esque, because this is like, you don't get to do anything in the Soviet Union without having the party official there to rat you out or close you down if they don't like you.
This is
the exact same thing.
Yeah, it is. I am the COVID thing at this point. It's a real disease, and people have really perished as a result of it, and that's incredibly sad. But the more we learn about it, the more we realize it's not as deadly as everybody thought it was, and that it's more easily dealt with than everybody thought it was. But nevertheless, it has now become such a political thing. It's being politicized for the purpose of restricting the rights of not only Californians, but people around the country, and also for the purpose of growing the size of government and bureaucracy. One of the things I think we have to understand is bureaucrats live for nothing more than to control your life and to increase the size of the bureaucracy. And they were seeing an example of it right there in the People's Socialist Republic of California. What is our recourse against these other than trying like mad to convince these legislators who don't care what we think that they shouldn't actually do this, or convince our governor who doesn't care what we think that he shouldn't sign it?
Well, so there's a couple of things. One of them is part of the reason I'm doing this show with you, and I'm very grateful and thankful for it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here.
Information, getting this information out to people, encouraging all your listeners. I don't care if they think people already know it, call, make sure they know this is going on, because this literally broke loose last Thursday at 4:55 in the afternoon. And remember, the legislature in general closes down on Fridays. So they did it the last possible minute before they went home, and they're already pushing this to its first hearing and vote on the 4th of August. So they gave it about 6 business days before they're going to go to vote on this. So this is what we call gut and amend and a fast track, because that's how they've set this up. So they're trying to take advantage of the situation. And what we always have to tell people is, if you look back to Gunmageddon wasn't just those handful of bills. It was also all the things that came on the backside of it that they had already laid out in prep. So this is just move one over several moves. But it's also looking at that COVID-19 has been used very effectively to close down camps in summer 2020. And the impact of that is between the scouting community, Christian camps, Catholic camps, Jewish camps, anything that's faith-based, looking at like Outward Bound, all sorts of other types of camps like that. People's introduction to the shooting sports via archery, BB guns, 22 rifles, shotguns accounts for about 600,000 youth annually in California. That was completely wiped out. So you have literally from like about junior high to high school, which is about a 7-year range of people, that they may only get to go to camp once during that time period. And their opportunity to be exposed to safety, firearms issues, whether they ever picked up a firearm or bow again in their life, they would have been given that initial safety lecture to know what to expect, how to handle it, and avoid issues later down in life for not only themselves, but their family. That education of safety has been completely removed. And the ultimate irony is the left constantly says, you people need to be teaching safety, yet they've completely undermined us. And now this bill follows up. So when I've said to people, this is an attempt by California and Gavin Newsom to destroy the culture of responsible firearms ownership, of responsible conservation in the state of California, you can look no further than these 2 bills, which are designed to absolutely wipe out that culture.
And I think it's honestly more than that, Rick. And so this cuts across many lines. It's not just firearms. It's also every soccer mom who happens to go to a church and wants their kids to go to camp. It's every Christian or person of faith, regardless, whatever faith there is, whether they're Jewish or Christian or Muslim or whatever, and they have a camp they'd like their kids to go to. They may not even be gun owners. They may not even be Second Amendment supporters. But one way or the other, this harms everyone who wants to send their kids to camp. I mean, for crying out loud, if you think about just 6th grade camp, and it's not related to any of those things, you'd like to send your kid to camp, I suspect that a lot of camps will just stay shut down because the cost of meeting all these overreaching regulations is far too high. So the reason why I bring it up is because it seems to me that quite often we have a fight against these things, and our fight is firearms rights related because that's what you and I do. Right. And that's a great thing. But sometimes we end up with a law that's proposed or written that cuts across many cultural lines and many political lines. And so I think as we talk to our friends about this, we shouldn't just talk to gun owners. We ought to be talking to everybody at church, everybody at synagogue, everybody at mosque. We ought to be talking to our neighbors about it who've got kids and would like their kids to go to 6th grade camp. This needs to get out, because otherwise these camps are going to go away, or they're going to become so overregulated and so overburdened with all this nonsense that the kids really can't have any fun. Pretty soon they'll be telling you can't have your kids go zip lining, or you can't have them go fishing, or you can't have them learn to, to start a campfire, or you can't have them sit around and sing campfire songs and play the guitar, or whatever the case might be. I mean, this is a point of it's not just it is a blatant Second Amendment violation, obviously, but I think it's also one of First Amendment. You're regulating people out of their right to speak their mind, do things, congregate as a group, and all the things that the First Amendment affords us rights to do. California is trying to restrict further and further. For crying out loud, they've already got us wearing a mask everywhere we go, and not being able to run our businesses. When's the last time the government ever said to somebody, you have a private business which you own, but you can't open? So this is getting pretty stinking bad, Rick. It really is.
And I appreciate what you're saying, because one of the things that we've seen is it's definitely a First Amendment violation, because for many people, they choose to send their kids to these camps for self-reliance. They send their kids to the camp to make a decision if they're going to have a faith or not. And that's a lot. You talk to a lot of people, when did you come to your faith? Be it, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, what have you. And it's often at a, junior high or high school camp. So, for this whole separation of church and state, they're not playing by those rules. When you also go to look at that, this is an area where you would get those skill sets, like a 6th grade science camp to go into the STEMs thing. You would get those skills at a JOTC camp to decide to help your country with its national defense. You would get those skill sets of what to do during a disaster, so you weren't dependent on big government to save your life, but you could help you and your neighborhood and your community. They're taking over all of that to turn people into sheep that have to look to the government for everything. That's part of what's going on.
I agree with you. You mentioned the phrase self-reliance, the word self-reliance. And that is something that a dictatorial government, which is what we really have in the beginnings of, and it's getting worse in the state of California. Something a dictatorial government cannot abide is having a populace that knows how to be self-reliant. They want you to be 100% relying on the state. And if you're watching this and you're thinking I'm just being paranoid, or that Rick is just being paranoid, I want to assure you that's not the case. We're seeing this stuff happen across the country right now, and the whole COVID-19 crisis is being used to remove the ability of people to be self-reliant. And yet we have more guns being purchased and people having a desire. Look, when you have brand new people going down to the range to buy firearms, it's because they've suddenly come to the shocking realization that they have to be self-reliant, because the government's not going to take care of them. When you look at places like Seattle and Portland, where the government officials, the elected officials, have completely abdicated their responsibility to keep the citizens of those places safe, to make sure that certain services are provided. They've abdicated that. I think what I've learned from that is what I suspected all along, and that is that government officials do not care, in many cases, about the well-being of the citizens over whom they rule. And as a result, if you're in that situation, then you need to be self-reliant. You need to know how to take care of yourself and your family, and you've got to have the ability to do that. This, what you're describing to me right now, and maybe it sounds like I'm a whack job nutcase, and if you think so, fine. I don't really care. But I'm not. Rick knows me. He knows I'm wacky, but I'm not crazy. This SB270, which I think is the number that you gave me right here. 217. I'm sorry, 217. SB217. What are they doing here? They're teaching, they're going right after the kids. You, Joel, as a 60-something-year-old man, might be self-reliant, know how to do that, but we're going to make darn sure your grandkids don't know how. We're going to take away as many opportunities as possible for them to know how. and we're going to control as best we can what they see, what they hear in school. School is no longer, my wife will tell you, she was in the school district for many, many decades. She will tell you in many cases school is no longer an educational place, it's an indoctrinational place. And the kids are indoctrinated now as much or more as they're educated. And now they want to, essentially, it sounds like they want to do the same thing with camp. And not just school camps, not just government camps, but camps run by CRPA or NRA or any other organization, or Ducks Unlimited, or for that matter, the First Baptist Church on the left in Brawley, California, or whatever. This is really, really frightening.
Well, and I talked to two completely out of that. I talked to a swim coach and I talked to a lacrosse coach who said this is literally going to break up what they do during the summers, which is to reach out to communities that they may not have the economic wherewithal. They said there's no way, because he said it's already hard enough to find people like you and me to donate for a kid that we're not related to go to a camp. He said, when I have to sit there and go, I don't need $100, Joel, I need $500 because he's got this new huge bill he's got to pay, there is no camp. And I talked to a couple of religious leaders and they said, there's certain things that we teach our kids and we see that as our responsibility. And if those kids are homeschooled or in public schools, they learn the state curriculum, but this now gives the state the ability to push their curriculum 24/7, 365, no matter where your kids are at.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, and again, this is kind of getting away from the Second Amendment and into the first here, but they are, let's face it, all of the rights in the Bill of Rights are interconnected. You can't separate one from the others. How many times has Rick or somebody else, or me, or someone else said that if you lose the Second Amendment, you lose them all. And the First Amendment is another way of, if you lose the Second Amendment and the First Amendment, the rest of them will all fall, and you have nothing left. And this is what they're attacking right here. You mentioned that sometimes kids come to faith at camp. Well, my kids, every last one of them, we modeled it for them, and they went to church with us, and we've read the Bible to them, and we've taught them scriptures and so on. But both of them came back from camp one day convinced that they wanted to actually study the Bible and they wanted to follow Christ. And that's where they learned that, was at a Christian church camp that our church puts on every year. And this is not an unusual occurrence. It doesn't matter what faith you follow. Your kids oftentimes learn more at a camp than they're going to learn at home. And sometimes they learn more at a camp than they're going to learn at service each week, whatever form that service takes. If the government can now control that camp, like Rick said, they're controlling what your kids are learning and hearing at camp. And if they come home convinced that your faith is right because they went to a camp, then they're going to come home convinced that the government is right because they went to a camp. So that's fairly frightening. I have visions of 1984 and Fahrenheit 451 in my head right here.
Yeah, so those were the two newest bills. We also have an Assembly Bill 88, which was a budget bill, which is now a public safety bill. And in that one, it's also frightening because they went after Franklin Firearms, which, as you know, Joel produces some of the nicer AR platform.
Yeah, Franklin Armory. Firearms. Yeah, they went after their Title I, right? Yeah,
so they went after that. But in that same piece of legislation, they decided that waiting for the precursor parts issue to 2025 wasn't good enough, so it bumps up to 2022. Remember, this has nothing to do with COVID-19 or economic recovery, but they took a budget bill and converted to this, and this is AB88 again. But here's the part that scares the bejesus out of me, and this is it. The third thing is dealing with co-registration of a firearm between a husband and wife, two partners. So think about this. Right now, I know you well enough, Joel, and you got to meet my wife before the show. So here you go. If I pass away, my firearms automatically, the moment I give my last breath, pass on to who?
I would think your wife or your children or to whomever you leave them.
Yeah, because they're community property.
Right. Well, to your wife, they're community property. Right. Or community property.
So they go to her.
Right.
If there's a divorce, it will be community property that is argued about in a courtroom because the state will see that as belonging to both of us.
Right.
So listen to how nasty this is. If AB88 gets signed by the governor, it says that if my wife happens to be on my side of the bed where I keep one of my CCW firearms, and the home invasion starts because I'm out doing something for the CRPA, and she picks up the firearm, lawfully defends herself. She's okay. I'm now a felon because I didn't control that firearm, because there will be no more dual registration, whether literal or implied, in California.
Oh, wow.
So that's right. If I die, it's hers. If I'm alive, it's ours. But if she uses it to defend herself, she's okay. But I'm now a felon and lose everything.
Which means that she's in a position now where, in the heat of the moment, when she has to defend her own life and perhaps the lives of whomever else is in the house, she has to be concerned about which gun she picks up with which to keep herself alive. Because if she picks up the wrong one, she's just made her husband a felon.
And you're a trainer, and you know for a fact there are a lot of husband and wives.
They have one gun.
Partially to save money, they have the same model firearm.
Oftentimes they only have one.
Yeah. But nobody's going to pick up a firearm if there's two Glock 19 stay in the house to read that little serial number on the side in the heat of the battle to make sure, wait, is that mine?
My wife has a Smith & Wesson Shield 9, and so do I. It's exactly the same gun. Yeah, I mean, I have to be very circumspect when I leave the house to make sure it's the one on my permit.
Right.
I do, but as far as in the house is concerned, here's the other thing.
Yeah.
In my house, we have, because I hate to say it, and it sounds like I'm blowing my own horn here, but I'm a YouTuber. My face is out there. Right. Shockingly to me, which is always shocking to me, and it always surprises me, people will walk up and say hi to me in public places. It happens all the time. And when it happens, I'm still at that point where I'm going, oh, Lord, please let me remember this person's name, because I feel like this is somebody I know, and they remember me, and I don't remember them. And then they'll tell me that they watch the channel, and then I'm like, well, in my head, thank you, God. I thought I was going to offend this poor person, but not remember them. I don't know this guy. So, but that being the case, there's lots of folks, everybody that's walked up and spoken to me has been very nice and very friendly, and they like the show, but there's always the chance that some nut is not going to like me and is going to try to cause me trouble. So now I'm in this weird position where I have, and in our home, as a result, in different places of the house, we have a pistol in a quick access pistol safe, because somebody could show up at my house, I suppose. Now, we have multiple properties, so you'd have to figure out, because we have rental properties and they're all in our name, so it's very likely you're going to go knock on the door and a renter's going to answer the door. It's not going to be me. Right. But but the point is that it could happen, and so as a result, we're always concerned about that. But now I have to go back and I have to think, oh, wait a minute, which gun is this? Who's registered to this gun now? Because God forbid that one of us pick up the wrong one. And now I've made a felon out of my wife, or she's made a felon out of me. That's part of AB88.
Correct. And remember, this is COVID-19 related. How?
Of course, yes.
How does this help with
right, it's not.
Recovery? And this is why I said I'm not being crazy, but why they are taking advantage of the situation to railroad things through, when it's very hard for us to stop it, and the only thing we'll be left with is the litigation arm.
Which takes years, and hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially for each case. Not
correct.
Not in aggregate. I mean, in aggregate, you're talking millions of dollars, and it takes years. And you don't know. I mean, who knows what judge you get? I mean, fortunately, the federal judiciary is changing a lot, but it still isn't where I'd like it to be.
That could change come November.
And depending, if Biden becomes if Joe Biden becomes president, he's an Alzheimer's patient as far as I'm concerned, and so whoever's the vice president is going to be running the place. But
just remember, the favorite thing is tapioca.
I saw a video the other day of some woman leading him out of a place by the arm like a nurse, and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope that's his daughter or something, because otherwise, if it's a nurse, that's kind of frightening.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if he picks Kamala as his running mate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting this is a prediction of mine. It's got nothing to do with California, but I think this is going to be the first time. I really do. I think they'll leverage COVID to this degree. I think this will be the first presidential election without a debate, because there's no way in the world that they're going to let Joe Biden get up on a stage and debate someone when he half the time doesn't know where he is, confuses his wife with his sister, has to answer questions which are pre-written and given to him ahead of time, and the only way he can answer them from his basement is if he's reading from a teleprompter. And that's what they do. Right. In case you're unaware, if you're watching this and you're unaware of that, that's what they do with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, when he has these interviews and he's in his basement, like right now, and I don't have a problem with him being in his basement. We don't have basements in California. I'm in our guest bedroom. And I put up the background. This is my little studio. So that's fine that he's in his basement. I'm not picking on that. He does them from his basement or wherever in his home. And they literally put up a teleprompter. They know the questions that are going to be asked ahead of time. And he reads the answers from a teleprompter, because he's incapable of answering the questions spontaneously. I'm telling you, Rick, this is going to be the first presidential election where there is no debate, and they're going to use COVID as an excuse.
See, and I think the commercial that they need to run is reminiscent of the one with LBJ and Goldwater, which is this the guy that you give the button on the nuclear weapons to.
Yeah, and the problem is nobody remembers that except you and me.
Yeah, I know.
And that's the issue. Is there anything else that we did not talk about that we probably ought to cover that's going on in our wacky state?
Just right now, we are doing some fun things at CRPA, trying to get people out, obviously, to get training, because we do have over 1.6 million new gun owners in California, which is great.
Yeah.
So we're reaching out. We're working with sheriff's departments to help them understand CCWs. But we've also done a kind of a cool thing. It's called the Return to Postal Matches. And so we did our first one with pistol. It turned out great. We had a lot of people participate. We're issuing medals. And what that is a postal match allows you to go to the range of your choice with a target. You take that target, you show it to the range safety officer, you shoot from the appropriate distance, you sign off on it, the range safety officer signs off that, yes, you, Joel, shot that target, sends it back, they score them, and then based on age, gender, locations, we put you in classes, and we award you medals and certificates. So that's to get people out there doing it. Currently, they're setting one up for rimfire. And then following that one, we went into league with the Single Action Shooting Society and are doing that one.
Well, that's going to be fun.
So that will give people a chance to kind of experience the SAS idea of shooting a single action pistol at the target. So we're working on some creative ideas like that across the state to try to get people back in the game and working together. And then up in Solano County, we have a really great 2A day that's coming up that we're going to bring about 1,000 people together while following COVID, which is really an interesting thing. But we've set up so there'll be no more than 3 to 4 people over a couple of days gathered at one space. But during that time period, we'll still meet somewhere between 800 and 1,000 people.
That ought to be extremely cool. Now, can people find information about those on your website?
Yeah, that'll be up on CRPA.org.
Okay, I will put CRPA.org in the description. I think it already is of the video, but I'll make sure it's there. The other thing I want to mention, because you mentioned new gun owners, is if you're a new gun owner in the state of California, the gun laws are extraordinarily complex, to put it mildly. There is a book that you can buy from the California Rifle and Pistol Association that is updated every year. Chuck Michelle and his staff update it every year with whatever's new. It is this thick. But I do have people contact me on a regular basis asking me, how can I figure out what the gun laws are in the state of California? Well, I'm telling you exactly how you can do it.
If they become a life member of the CRPA, they will automatically get an autographed copy of that book for free. But if they want to buy the book, they can also call us at our phone number, 714-992-2772, or go to crpa.org and they can order the book from us online.
And I do have a copy myself, and I refer to it often. It's around here in my office somewhere, and I'd have to go find it. I think it's on the bookcase in the other room, but it is a great book, and if you're a California gun owner, it's a must-have. You really have to have that. The other thing I will mention, too, is that in the next few hours, I'll be interviewing David Frankel, who wrote this great book. It's called Coming to Terms. And he wrote this because, you'd have to be old enough to remember it, but there was a horrific shooting in San Francisco in 1993 in a law firm there. And at the time, David was employed by that law firm, and he was present when it occurred, and I think 8 people died and a number of others were injured. He wrote this book to tell the story, and I'll be interviewing him, so look for that in the next few days. That'll be published, and I'm looking forward to talking with him later on this afternoon. We'll get that published in the next few days for you. And you can also get this book, and I think you can get it in various different places, and my understanding is that David is donating the proceeds to CRPA.
Yes, he does.
Which is kind of cool. So I don't know if can you get this on your website as well or no?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so and I just got done reading it. It also, what I like about it, also has a copy of the Heller decision in the back. But this is a fantastic read. It's a brief read because it's a little bitty book, but it is a great read. And just reading his story and how he ended up being, at the end of the day, a very dedicated Second Amendment advocate and advocate of the Bill of Rights, even though so often we hear about folks who suffer through these horrible things and survive them, and they go the other way. And so it's a really interesting story. So I urge you to pick up the book. It's called let me hold it in the right place here. It's called Coming to Terms. It's by David Frankel. You can get it at the CRPA website, and all the proceeds for the sale of the book are being donated to the California Rifle and Pistol Association. So I urge you to grab a copy, and then don't forget to grab a copy of that legal book, because that one will keep you out of jail if you understand the laws in the state of California. And every year they're updated. So you kind of got to get a new one every year, because the laws, as you can tell, here's all the stuff I'm writing down from Rick telling me things. As you can tell, the laws in California get more draconian as we go. All right, I want to leave, I'm going to give you an opportunity to wrap up for us here in a minute, Rick, but I want to leave you with this thought if you're watching this. We have to stop electing these people. We have to stop. We elect them, and I've talked to gun owners who vote for some of these people because they don't consider themselves single issue voters. Well, I voted for this guy because I feel strongly about X, Y, Z, or whatever. I want to make clear to you, we just went over AB88 and SB217, as if AB3030 wasn't bad enough. These people whom we're voting for because we're not single-issue voters and we like some other aspect of what they do, are stripping us of our rights. And they are seizing more and more and more control over our everyday lives. At this point, I strongly suggest, if you're not a single-issue voter, that you start. We cannot continue to elect these people to office. We have to elect them. We've got to vote them out of office at the earliest possible opportunity. And whatever we need to do that, to come together and decide to do that and get the word out or whatever, that's what we need to do. Now, I'm talking about using the system here. Now, don't take that and say, I want to go get a gun and go do something. Okay, please, because I'm not advocating that. There's enough of that going on right now anyway. All right, that's not what I'm talking about. The founding fathers of this country gave us a process by which to change people and fire them, essentially, and hire somebody we like. It's called an election. And although the government of California does cheat, we can still win, but we have to get together on it. We have to work together. We need to support CRPA, to support the strong work that they do, and we got to get to the ballot box, and we've got to vote on a single issue basis. Are you, as a politician, stripping me of my rights or not? Are you supportive of my First, Second, nobody talks about the Third Amendment, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth Amendment rights, and so on? And if you're not, then you need to be fired, and I'll hire somebody who is. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Anything else that we should talk about, Rick?
Well, I'll kind of piggyback along that. One of my favorite politicians ever, I think he set the bar for everybody else, and many have failed it, was George Washington. I think there's been a focus on maligning Washington, but one of the most unique things, and it's actually probably the only pilgrimage I would advocate in the U.S., is going to Mount Vernon. That man chose not to be buried in the Capitol building, chose not to have anything. In fact, when you look at his gravesite, it says simply this: George Washington, American farmer, because he didn't want to be remembered for being the president, a general, or anything. He was a farmer that happened to do other things for the benefit of his country, but at the end of the day was just a farmer. And he had said in his own diaries and writings at the time that nobody should be in office more than 1 or 2 terms, which is why he stepped down when a lot of people wanted to see him die in the office of the presidency and almost make it like our form of a monarchy. He refused. He said, I'm done with my second term. I am leaving. And he did not go back to D.C. He didn't get involved in politics afterwards. He didn't set up a presidential library, task force, things like that. I think that's something that we have to remember. We've had people sitting in the Assembly, sitting in the Senate, sitting as senators for decades. They need to go. That's not the American way. And don't let them, cloak themselves and I'm being like the founding fathers. No, you're not. You're absolutely diabolically the opposite. And going over what you said about we're not there just to fight for a single issue. What we're all fighting for, whether you believe in religion, don't believe in religion, believe in the Second Amendment, don't believe in the Second Amendment, is the choice to have a belief. If these people get their way, you will have no choice for any belief, whatever that may be, but what the government tells you to believe.
Anyway, I think we've talked about a whole lot, Rick, and we've been on for about an hour here, so I apologize for taking so much of your time.
No problem. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Thank you very much, my friend. I'm looking forward to that hunting trip we were talking about before.
Me too.
Just let me know.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, sir. Have a wonderful week. And thank
too.
you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you again very much for all of your support and for sticking with us as long as you did. My goodness, if you stuck with us this long, you're truly a Second Amendment supporter. I do urge you to join the California Rifle and Pistol Association if you're not already a member. And even if you're outside of California, if you wouldn't mind supporting CRPA, I'd really appreciate it. After all, California tends to either affect California or infect the rest of the country. So the battle truly is in these restrictive states. Thank you again. Have a wonderful week. And wherever you go, whatever you do, please be safe.